Hello, in today's video, we're going to be talking about how you can use data loss prevention in Microsoft Purview to prevent emails and attachments that contain sensitivity labels from leaving your organization. So to set this up, the first thing that we need to do is browse to purview.microsoft.com. Once we're there, we're going to then click Solutions in the left-hand navigation, and we're going to select Data Loss Prevention. And we're going to select Policies, and then we want to click Create Policy. And we want to, under the category, select Custom. We're then going to select Custom Policy under Regulations, and we're going to click Next. We're then going to put in a name for our policy as well as a description, and we're going to click Next. And it's next going to ask us if we want to select any admin units at all. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to be applying it to the full directory, so I'm not going to be adding or removing any admin units. So if that's something that you want to do, that would be the stage to do it at. But in this scenario, we're just going to go for the full directory. I'm then going to click Next. And you'll see here we've got the locations now. So because this is being applied to emails and attachments, I actually only want Exchange email as the only location. So I'm going to unselect all these other options here. And you'll notice that what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it as all groups in the scope here. However, if you wanted to scope this to a smaller group of users, you can do that by going to Edit here, and you can then select specific groups, or if you wanted to, you could exclude groups as well. I'd probably recommend that to trial initially within your organization, perhaps have a pilot group or something along those lines, just to kind of start off with a small group of users before applying it to everyone in the organization. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to apply it to the entire tenant. So I'm then going to click Next, and we're going to create a customized rule. So we'll click Create Rule. Again, I'm going to put a name and description in here. I'm actually going to just put the same name and description that I use for the policy. However, you may choose to set that slightly different in your own environment, especially if you've got multiple rules potentially within a policy or something like that. You're going to want to have some unique names and some more descriptive descriptions as well. So once we've sorted that out, we're then going to add a condition. Our first condition that we're going to add is content contains, and we'll click add, and then we're going to select sensitivity labels. So once that's selected, we can see we've got the list of sensitivity labels to choose from. You'll notice that I have some sub-labels here that are named internal only. So these are sensitivity labels that are actually applying encryption that prevents externals from being able to open any emails or files that have those labels. So if I actually select all of those ones, those are the ones that we want to add because essentially they've been marked as being internal only, so we don't really want them leaving the organization. So I'm going to click Next, or add rather, and then you'll notice here that it's got the options that we're evaluating. So as I said, I want to look for both the message and any attachments. If you wanted to scope it slightly differently, you can, but I recommend having it for message and attachment as well. And we're going to add another condition, which is content is shared from Microsoft 365. So if I select that option there, we then just want to change this so that it's with people outside my organization. So what we're doing there is we can see that we're looking for sensitivity labels, so a message or attachment that has any of these sensitivity labels, and it's worth just double checking that your operator for the group is set to any of these. Ours is, so that's perfect. And we're also looking to see, is the content shared from Microsoft 365 with people outside of my organization? So it's going out externally. That's when we want this policy to trigger. So you'll notice then we've got the actions option, and what we're going to want to do is select this option, which is restrict access or encrypt the content in Microsoft 365 locations. And then what we want to do is just make sure that block only people outside your organization is selected. So what that's meaning is that if that email was sent to someone externally, the externals on that email are going to be blocked. Potentially, if you had someone who was internal CC'd on that email or whatever, they should still receive it. It depends. Typically, if a policy tip kicks in, it's not going to allow you to actually send the email until you've removed the external recipients. But I have seen it in some cases where users If they're very, very quick with sending an email, it will go out. Typically, the service in the back end will actually prevent it from going to that recipient. But in that scenario, it would just mean that if there was an internal recipient on there as well, they would still receive the email. And then we've got user notifications. So we're going to turn this on, and this will essentially send the user an email, just like I said. So if potentially that they are very quick with sending that email and they manage to get past the policy tip kicking in, they will get an email notifying them that their attempt to send that email was blocked. And also we've got the ability to enable a policy tip, which I recommend. And I recommend customizing that so that you can add a custom message which far better represents what the policy is actually doing compared to what the default kind of text is out of the box. So I've got something that I prepared earlier, which is you're about to send an attachment or email using an internal only sensitivity label to an external recipient. DLP is configured to block sending internal only labeled content externally. So that's what we've added in there, which is nice. We've got our custom policy tip. These other options we're just going to ignore for now. There is the ability to allow users to override data loss prevention policies or rules. So I'm not going to do that in this scenario because we're being quite specific here in the sense of this data shouldn't be leaving the organization, so we don't want to give them the option to override. But you might find if you're doing it for other labels that do typically allow externals to have access to the content, then you might want to give the option for users to override. If you select that, you do have a few other options that are available. Require a business justification to override is a great option because it will require them to input some text just to explain why they're doing that. That all gets captured in the audit log as well, if for whatever reason that needs to be reviewed at a later date. But for now, we're going to leave that disabled. We've got the ability as well to select the severity for this. So in our case, I'm just going to select medium for that. We're going to send an alert to admins when a rule match occurs. You can select other people as well if you wanted to extend that. And we've got the ability to send the alert every time an activity matches the rule, which we'll do in this case. Or you could do it when a certain volume of activity reaches a threshold. So for example, if you wanted it to be actually, once we've detected 15 incidences, then we'll kind of select, we'll then send the alert to the administrator, or potentially it could be volume. So if it was a certain, we can see megabytes is the example there, and then we're going to select kind of the duration that happened in, and the users that's applying to. But in our case, we're going to set it to every time an activity match to the rule. And you've also got the ability as well to use email incident reports to notify when a policy match occurs, which provides it's similar to the alerts where you get an incident report, but in that email there's far more information in the actual email. An alert, typically that's something that you'll have to go into the portal to actually review further and get some information, whereas the incident report will at least give us some initial information regarding the incident. I'm going to leave that disabled for now though, and then we've got additional options. So if there's a match for this rule, stop processing additional DLP policies and rules. In our case, we don't want to do that, but you might want to choose to select that if potentially you've got multiple policies and rules in your environment, and actually you don't want, if this one's hit, then you don't want additional ones to kind of process beyond this one, and that'll be based on kind of priorities and stuff. You'll see at the bottom here we've actually got a priority for the rule. In our case, we don't need to change that. We've only got the one rule, so we'll leave that as 0, and we'll click save on that. Okay, now that that's saved, we can then see we've got a bit of an overview of what that rule is doing. So we can see it's looking for content that contains any of these sensitivity labels. It's looking at both the message and the attachment, and it's for content that's shared from Microsoft 365 with people outside my organization. And we can see that users are going to be notified with an email and a policy tip. Access is going to be restricted for external users, and it's going to send an alert to administrators. So we'll click next again, and this is where we'll be able to decide our policy mode. So in our case, in this demo, I'm just going to turn the policy on immediately. However, in your own environment, I strongly recommend using the option to run the policy in simulation mode. You can then you can review kind of alerts and bits and pieces that have been triggered by that, just to understand, okay, what kind of impact is this going to have on the organization? And you can choose to display policy tips or not when it's in the simulation mode. So that's just a nice option for, just to kind of rule out any issues that may happen if you kind of deployed it in a live mode for all your users in the organization. And as I said previously as well, it might be sensible just to scope that to a pilot group of users initially, just to, even with it turned on, just so that you can then really understand, okay, how's that going to work in the real world? And just you can gather feedback from those users just to understand if there's going to be any issues that may impact the wider organization. We're going to click next now, and I'm then going to click submit. So it's just going to validate it now. That can take a few seconds to go through. What I will do is once that policy has pushed out to the tenant, I will then jump into a demo. That typically takes anywhere from an hour to 24 hours for it to kind of impact the whole of your tenant. That largely depends on how large your tenant is. If you've got a very small number of users, you'll probably find that pushes out quite quickly. However, if you've got thousands and thousands of users, that might take a bit of time before it hits everyone. But we can say that's now created, and we'll come back once that's propagated to the tenant. Okay, so it has now propagated to the tenant, and what I'm going to just do is show you an example of what it looks like for an end user. So here we've got a new email that we're drafting, and we're just going to put in an external email address here to trigger it. We'll just give it some test information in there, and now what we're going to do is we're going to select our internal only sensitivity label. So we're going to select that one there. As you can see, now that we've attached that to the email, we can see that we get the policy tip. So you're about to send an attachment or email using an internal only sensitivity label to an external recipient. DLP is configured to block sending internal only labeled content externally. It's a bit of a mouthful. So that's all working the way that it is now. So if we go show details, it's actually going to explain the recipient that's kind of causing the issue there and give us the option to remove them. If I click send on that, the user's then going to get a send blocked. And this is a more generic message here that they'll receive. But the main kind of focus here is that they're unable to send the email to the external recipient. Now, I'll just very quickly show you another example using an attachment. So if I just discard that quickly and do a new email, and again, we're going to just put in our external email, put in some text, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to attach a file there, and you'll notice that I've just, by default, it's set it as a link. You'll notice that there's no policy tip or anything like that. So that's just something to note. If it is a sharing link, that the attachment has been attached as a sharing link, it's not going to trigger the block or the policy tip. Whereas if I actually go to attach as a copy, you'll now see that the policy tips appearing there, and again we get the same option to show details, and if I click send, you'll notice as well that you get the block. So it's just important to note that that doesn't work for the links if it's a link to a file. So one way to get around that would be to make sure that your internal only sensitivity label is using encryption to restrict it internally. That would mean that if anyone gets that link and they attempt to access that file, they're not going to be able to access it, even if they was able to receive it via email. But in our case, obviously we've just attached that now, and we can see that the block is in place. So that is essentially how you can use data loss prevention in Microsoft Purview to restrict sending emails and attachments that are using particular sensitivity labels. I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions or anything, please leave them in the comments down below. Thanks very much for watching.